What a wonderful afternoon to see you all here. I wish my voice was better for you, but hey, that's the way it goes sometimes. It'll clear up probably before tonight's dance. What do you think? My name is Kip Garvey. For those of you who know me, those of you who don't know me, the name is still Kip Garvey. Can't change that. I've been dancing since 1957, and square dancing, and calling since 1960. So I've been around for a little bit. I've seen a lot of changes happen to our activity, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Also, I have a handout here that will explain what we've been able to do with the Jackson Claim Jumpers, a wonderful club. For the past 2.5 years, we've been able to take the club and basically double it, almost triple it in size. So we have some exciting news for you in that regard too. Now, so that we can all get on the same page, it's really critical, I think, that we understand where we are in the process. What brought us to this point where we have to listen to saddened news, like Jim Osborne is here today. Jim just came in and reported that a 40-year-old club, Sunnyvale Singles, has folded. This club, when Gary Carnes had it, ran beginner classes that were 25, 30, and 35 squares in size. So, also we have another club, the Crazy Daisies. How are they gone, Jim? Yep. They're gone as well. When I moved from Massachusetts to California, Fremont area, I was the club caller for the Keyway Swingers. Club over 60 years old. They folded up last December. So we have to really start taking a look at what brought this about. Where are we today? We've spent a lot of time speculating. We spent a lot of time supposing, and a lot of time, not enough time, really understanding what caused this, so that if we can address the true causes, I think we can find a solution. I think we can. Now, in 1968, I was a sophomore in college, calling for 8 years. And the most profound characteristic of our dancing at that time was the horrific number of new calls that were being written all the time. I had to actually subscribe to 3 different call-a note services. The Southern California note service, Will Orlick's note service, so I could get the information out of the Midwest, and Jack Lazzary's note service, so I could get the information from Florida and the East Coast. And I remember distinctly that in some of those months, the number of new calls that would be published in these note services were as high as 37. There was one month where there were 44 new calls at one time. So could you imagine what the dancers in that day were going through? Every single dance, they expected that they would be walked through a new call. It was just common that they would walk through a new call. The walkthroughs and the workshopping, even during Saturday night dances, was an expected part of the dance. And that had to stop. And we were getting the hue and cry from across the nation that had to stop. Dancers just wanted to dance. They didn't want to be workshopped all the time. Call Lab started in 1972 and became a functioning organization in 1974. And in 1976, it published its first dance program. And that was called the Mainstream Program, pure and simple. Now, it wasn't as simple to design that as you might think. The callers from all around the country were contributing their experiences, and there was not a lot of agreement as to what should comprise our mainstream dancing. Not a lot at all. And so for those callers to finally agree on the 68 basics contained in the mainstream program was a huge step forward for the activity. However, what was overlooked in the process is that dancers at that time were only learning 54 calls. And so a brand new dancer who walked in could dance in 10 weeks, learn the basic calls, and in another 10 weeks learn the extended basic calls, and they would know 54 calls. And then they would go out and they would dance. So can you imagine how that compares to where we are today? But when the mainstream program was designed, they took the 54 calls and immediately added 14 to them. That's where they came up with 68. So these 14 calls weren't brand new calls. They were experimentals that had been workshopped several times throughout the years prior to the acceptance of the dance program. However, most of the existing dancers knew these calls, and so they were okay But a brand new dancer now had to learn not 54, but 68 brand new calls. And that lasted for how long? For 1 year. And then the callers from the East Coast, myself included, callers from the West Coast, particularly California, but not so much Washington and Oregon, I might add, felt it wasn't enough. Callers from the huge metro areas of Chicago, St. Louis, Dallas, Texas. It wasn't enough. The mainstream 68 was not enough. And so they came up with another list of an additional 12 calls. And the powers that be in Call Lab, they thought they were just forming one dance program. They didn't think they were designing multiple dance programs. So they simply said, okay, in those areas, you guys can do a thing called mainstream-plus. And in the other areas of the country that didn't want to do that, you just did mainstream. So what do you actually think happened, or what did you see on advertised dances? You saw mainstream-plus. That's what you saw. And that was the first time the word plus was introduced to our dance programs. But now that 68 had an additional 13 calls. And that's what they didn't anticipate and think enough about. That a brand new dancer did not have to know 68 calls now. They had to learn 71 calls before they became totally functional. How long did that last? Are you ready? 1 year. That was 1977. By 1978, the convention convened and they decided that, hey, the 13 calls just aren't enough. We need another 12. And so then other factors inside Call Lab said, basically, and it was led by guys like Jack Murtha. Anybody here remember Jack? Well, God bless his soul. He was right on track. Jack wanted to preserve the mainstream 68 calls regardless. He was adamant, and he brought his military training into it and demanded that they freeze the mainstream program at 68, break the word plus off of it, just keep mainstream 68. So Plus now had two programs. They had Plus 1, which was the 13 calls, and then they had Plus 2, which was 12 calls. 12 more calls. So that brings the total up to 93 that a new dancer has to learn before they can come in and dance Plus 2. A year later, they combined the Plus 1 and the Plus 2, and that became what we have today, which is now 29 additional calls beyond mainstream, and that's our Plus program. Meanwhile, who are the movers and shakers? I think most of them are in this room, right here today. All right, the most avid dancers of the time, what were they doing? They were the ones running the executive committees, the executive boards of the clubs. They were running the associations. They were doing everything they could to develop square dancing, which is the right thing. But they were also the most avid dancer. How long does it take an avid dancer to learn 12 calls? It takes less than 2 months. So they could add 12 more calls to a dance program, and your avid dancer didn't feel it. But you got further and further, farther and farther away from your newer dancer. The newer dancer was reaching all the time. And for anybody to expect a newer dancer today to actually learn and be able to dance in a capable manner, the 98 calls contained in the Plus program from the basics right on through, I think what we've done in the past 30 years is witness that that's just not going to happen. In the past 30 years, it hasn't happened. And the reason these clubs are folding is because they insisted that they were going to be the Plus clubs, somebody else could teach the new dancers, and so that was it. If you don't have new blood coming into your club, you are going to fold. It's as simple as that. Now, if you think that we can develop our clubs without entertaining newer dancers, you got another thing coming. We just don't have it anymore, folks. The Northern California Square Dance Association, when I moved to California in 1980, had over 160 clubs in it. Do you know what it has today? 19. And it's just not California. Nortex, which is a huge dancing association in Dallas, Texas, in 1981, they had 163 clubs in their organization. Today, they have 33, and 13 of them are round dance clubs. So, if you think that we're pretty close to the precipice here, you're right. And I think you're feeling this because that's why you're here today. So, let's let history teach us correctly. Let's not be a victim of not learning by our own historic experiences and continuing on trying to develop plus dancers off the street. It just doesn't happen. Today's dancing is so complex that you have no idea of how complex it is. But if you could be in the situation of a square dance caller who's trying to teach people who come in off the street how to understand that the circulators take the place of the dancer ahead of you, and they're looking like, where? Ahead of you, the dancer ahead of you. Somebody's back. Can you see somebody's back? Oh yeah, I see their back. So they circulate, then the back disappears. Where'd they go now? Now this is something that we experience as the trainers of the dancers, but you don't normally see it if you're dancing. To actually get what we call the spatial orientation, to understand how we interact with 7 other people in different geometric formations, is a lot of information for newer dancers to absorb, and they cannot do it if you're bombarding them with additional vocabulary all the time, every dance, 2 new calls, 4 new calls, 3 new calls. It will not happen. What has Call Lab done to address this? Because in the 90s, there was a huge hue and cry across the land that the reason we're this way is because Call Lab programs. If they hadn't started those darn programs, we'd have been just fine. Well, unfortunately, we live in what we call a graduated society. From the time that we're this high, we enter the 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade. Everything that we do in life is graduated. So in trying to organize dance programs, it was impossible to do so without coming up with a graduated structure. So it wasn't the graduated structure that was the problem. The problem was that the graduations started too high. We were so focused on plus and calls beyond mainstream that we were already out of the reach of the newer dancer before we even started. So what has Call Lab done? They began to realize the issue in the 90s, and they put together a program, began in 1996, and they said, maybe the programs are not correct. If we're going to change the programs, what should we do? And they put together the best minds in the business, and they called it Team 2000, because that was the goal. Started in 96, but they knew they wouldn't be able to get anything done until the year 2000. So they called themselves Team 2000. Out of that collection of the smartest guys and gals in the industry that I've ever had the pleasure to work with, it was brilliant. They came up with a very simple proposal. And you have to understand that in 1997, the Direction, which is the publication that goes to Call Lab, every single issue had essays that would give both pros and cons to changing the dance programs. So this was a sophisticated and an all-encompassing effort on Call Lab's part to see if changing the dance programs would really do anything. The 1998 convention was dedicated to the single question. The only thing that was going to be voted on that year was whether or not they were going to change the dance programs. The entire convention, which is a 3-day convention, where you get 0 sleep, because you are in discussions about this in the meeting rooms, in the lunch rooms, in the lounges, in your own personal private room. Somebody's knocking on the door. Kip, what do you think about it? I don't think I can go along with that. Gee, come on in. And it was an amazing process. They came up Wednesday morning with the proposal. And the proposal was this. It was a 3-part proposal. I'll never forget it. And this was the largest single jump in attendance at Call Lab in the 6 years prior. There were over 500 callers at this convention. And so the question came up. It was a 3-part question, and it said, Call Lab will design an entry-level program that will be 25 weeks long, and it will select the calls from the basic list, and possibly from the extended list if necessary. That was part 1. Part 2, the second dance program would be comprised of any calls that were not selected from the basic list, but were on the extended program, and they were also on the mainstream program, and any of the plus calls that were available at the time. And then the third aspect was the third dancing program will be extended applications of these first 2 programs. What you and I might recognize as all position dancing or dance by definition. All right, they walked away from those 2 terms by 1998, and they were emphasizing standard applications and extended applications. So, in a horrific vote on Wednesday morning, the vote came down, and I'm not exactly sure the number. It was either, I think it was 216 to 216. It was the only time in this convention that they'd ever had a question fail by that, in that manner. Because, and it also illustrated how hugely divided our square dance community was. And we had a lot of pressure from overseas callers who were saying, you know, these dance programs are fine. If you guys used them right, you'd be okay. So this is just to give you some history of what's been going on. And that wasn't the last effort that Call Lab put forth. In the year 2000, they came up, I think it was 1999, Mike Seastrom had a new dancer in his class, and this guy was a whiz. He was a national marketing genius. His name was Jim Hensley. And he came up with a program for Call Lab. He couldn't understand why we didn't have just tens of thousands of dancers more than we had. He couldn't understand it. He was a brand new dancer. And so he agreed that he would bring forth his talents and work with his all his people to try to help develop square dancing. And we built a foundation on it. We put a 501c3 foundation together, and we made contributions to it for this one effort. 2001 might ring a bell to you, but we put a singing call together with 11 of the most popular callers in the country doing vocals on God Bless America. And we only printed 200. And we auctioned them off at the Call Lab convention and raised over $10,000. And that kicked off the foundation. 2 years later, Jim Hensley came back and gave his report. He said, everything that you're thinking that's wrong with square dancing isn't what's wrong with square dancing. He said, what's wrong with square dancing is the commitment. Right on the Call Lab program. I don't have my glasses on. This is from 1979. Call Lab recommends 41 sessions of 2.5 hours each, or approximately 80 hours of instruction to teach 68 calls. Not 98, 68. What were we doing? We were trying to teach 98 calls in 6 months, 9 months. What happens? What happens with newer dancers? They fail. And when they fail, they just throw their hands up. No, it's too tough for me. No, you guys have fun. I'm done. And when they walk away with that kind of an attitude, they bring it, and that's what they tell their friends. And this is the type of social advertising that has worked against us all these years. When you stop and think about it, and I checked with Jim Mayo, this is a fact, back in the 80s and the 70s, the retention factor was only 25%. That's all it was. And those were the days when our beginner classes were 25 squares and 30 squares large. 25%. That means 1 out of 4 dancers would actually be with us 2 years down the road after they graduated from class. And that's when things were good. Okay? You know what our retention factor is right now? It's like 12%. That's how many we retain. Half of that. And you all know what I'm talking about because you must feel it. You must know that something's wrong. So if you understand the history of what's developed over time, and you understand that the problem is that getting new dancers to dance the way we dance is not going to happen under our current teaching paradigm. We've proven that. 30 years going strong. We've proven it's not going to work. We have to make a change, don't we? Well, in 2003, I was working for Hewlett Packard, and I was in the research and development lab over in Cupertino for retail products. And they came to me and they wanted me to head up a team for what they call emerging products. Most of my team was overseas. They were in Singapore, they were in Taiwan. And my club got pretty tired of me calling up 3 o'clock in the afternoon and saying, you're going to have to get another call for tonight. Because, all of my conference calls had to be at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. We had 4 product lines running through simultaneously all year long. And if something went wrong, seriously wrong and we didn't meet our obligations, we could lose shelf space in Office Depot, Best Buy, Walmart, you name it. And so what we had to do was we had to be on the phone fixing issues when they came up so that we met our dates. And I had no choice. I've been calling for a long, long time, since I was 13 years old, and I had to put the mic down. And I did. I retired. And I remember distinctly at that time in 2003, the plan that Jim Hensley had put together was called the Phoenix Plan, and it had just fallen through. It just failed to pass in the 2002 Call Lab Convention. And I said, you know what? Without anything in the works, I don't think Square Dance is going anywhere. I really think it's on a dead-end street. I walked off for 13 years. My phone rang. It was Mary Lambert in the fall of 2015. And she said, Kip, you don't know me, but. And we had a wonderful introduction. I went down and met with her and George and the rest of the club members who were on the board. We talked for a while. And they were losing their club caller at the time. It was going to be gone in January. And so my next call, because I always do it, it's just one of my professional things, I called that caller on the phone. And I said, I'm being talked to with the Jackson Claim Jumpers, and I want to make sure that you are, in fact, retiring and everything's in. Oh, yeah. He said, Kip, go ahead. Green light, go. So I sat down with them, and then I said, okay, now how are you going to run your program? Give me some history. What about your classes? Tell me how many people are in your club from the last 3 years of classes. And the answer was like 4. Was it 4, maybe? And I said, well, you know, you're not going to survive. It's not going to work that way. What you're going to have to do is we're going to have to design a new way to entertain new dancers and to keep them in the club as long as we possibly can. We may only end up with 25% final retention after 2 years, but we have to do it this way. You cannot expect the dancers to come in off the street and be dancing with you on Monday nights, which is their plus dancing night. And it just won't, it's not going to happen, and I won't be a part of it. And so I didn't do it to twist their arm. I did it because I really honestly felt that way. If you don't do things differently, you're going to lose. You're just going to lose eventually. And so I came up with a plan. They sat down. They kicked it around. I had 100% support from that board to start with a program that I have right here, right now. Ray? Where's Ray? Ray, you want to pass these out? Terry, you want to help? Yeah. This gives you the complete history of the 2.5 years of what we did at Jackson Claim Jumpers, okay? Including all the numbers. And I'm one of these anal kind of guys, you know. I keep track of everything. I never throw anything away, and I like to keep records. And so what we did was we immediately said we're going to have to come up with some sort of a plan to get people in so they can learn. And we want to leverage off of the work done by Team 2000. And Team 2000 said the best application for new dancers is to learn 50 calls. So we said, okay, we'll do a 50-call program in 12 weeks. And we'll pre-sell it. So we sell the program, how much do we sell it for? $60? We sell the program for $60 per person. It's a 12-week program. And this gives us the opportunity to do as many as 4 a year, but we thought that would be crowding it. So we started out by doing 3 a year. We did one in January. We had a went for 12 weeks. Then we leave about a 3-week gap for a graduation and consolidation. Then we start the second group. And then, same thing. 12 weeks later, 15 weeks later, we start the third group in May. So we did January, May, and September. We did those 3 starting times. All right? There were classes where we had phenomenal success. Our very first class was huge. It had 26 brand new people come into the hall in January. We graduated 17 of them. 11 of them joined the club, and 9 of them are still current members. So these are on page 3. You can go through and take a look at them yourself. I won't bother to recite them for you, but you can see we had an anomalous in May of 2016. We only had 5 gals that came in to learn, and the amazing thing is that 3 of them are still with us, and 4 of them would have been with us, but she moved. One of them moved up to Oregon, or Washington, or someplace. And the other thing is that all of the club dances, we only had about 27 club dancers in Jackson Claim Jumpers at the time, and we were down to 13 of those originals because of health issues, people moving out. Some people weren't happy with what with the changes going on in the club, very few there, but most of them were people who were moving out of the area and getting out of California or doing whatever they were doing. So they had life changes, and it's typical. This is natural attrition that happens in every square dance club, and it's something we don't give enough thought to. Because if you think you got 20 squares in your club right now, and 10 years from now you're still going to have 20 squares, you're wrong. You're going to lose dancers. It just happens. People come and go, and they move in and out. They find other things to do. It just happens. So you have to take care of your natural attrition, and you also have to take care of replacing people. And it still takes 2 years or 3 years of dancing before anybody reaches a point in their dancing career where they become proficient enough to like join the board, work on the board, and become functioning club members. All right? We have lots and lots of people who love square dancing from day one, and they just love it to death. And then, boom, something happens, 10, 12 months later, you don't see them anymore. What happened? Well, we loved it, it was great fun, but we're off doing something else. And so this is not included in our retention figure. Our goals, we have a 5-year plan. Our goal is to triple the size of the club, basically from 30 to 90 dancers in 5 years. We thought that was a reasonable goal. And I can tell you that we are, right now, our roster has 62 paid dues members on it. Okay, we started with 27, we went down to 13, from the 27 to the 13, and we built that up to 62. So we're doing something right. What I think we're doing right is we're giving new dancers a chance to enjoy the activity. Now, this took some structural changes. It didn't happen overnight, and we had to have a lot of dialogue. Because what we did was we opened up the club for a second night of dancing. So Jackson Claim Jumpers normally dances on Monday nights. That's their plus dancing night. And we introduced a Thursday night where we would do all of the teaching, and we call it a mainstream dance. So we got the club to embrace the idea that it would be multi-level. That it would have Thursday night dancers who dance mainstream, and then it would have Monday night dancers who dance plus. And that was the structure. And you have to define your structure before you start making plans. You really need to know what your structure is going to be. So we were able to do that because we had access to a hall. And our hall is $45 a night or something like that. All right. I think it's 45. It wasn't at the time. It was something less than that. But regardless of that, that was something we could afford. And that's another thing we had to do is set up budgeting. We had to actually budget this thing completely, all the way through all 5 years, to see exactly what it would look like. And I'm happy to tell you that the club is doing financially very well. And they treat me well, too. I have no complaints. So it wasn't that somebody had to give up half of their night's pay or anything like that. That just didn't happen. Everybody is happy. The money is in place. The club is moving along really, really well. The final thing we had to do was design the Thursday night so we could accommodate those new dancers who finished the 12-week program. And also, this 50-call 12-week Learn to Dance program is another initiative within Collar Lab that's about ready to break out. It's called the Sustainable Square Dance Initiative. However, that particular program, they're trying to rebuild basic clubs. So they're going to stick to the 50. They're not going to go beyond that. I knew that wouldn't work in California. Just not going to work. The best thing we can hope for is to produce mainstream dancers. That's the best. We can't produce just basic dancers. There'd be no place for them to dance at all. But some of our festivals are still holding red light, green light floors, and we still have a lot of mainstream going on. And so that seemed to be an appropriate destination. So what we did was we said, okay, we'll sell a 12-week program. We'll have them come in and learn the basic 50. And then we have the remaining 12 calls. And it's a numbering thing. That's why the numbers don't add up just right. But there's only 12 calls left to finish mainstream. So we sell them as second 12-week package for the same price. And those dancers will come in and dance their session as a second session on Thursday nights. But this had a way of addressing one of the most serious flaws in the current process. And the serious flaw is this. If you do find survivors who get through a 98 call program in 9 months and they become plus dancers, what do you think the chances are that they're going to invite all their friends to come in the following year and learn? I've got it right here for you, folks. They don't want to give up what they're doing. They survived, all right, and it was hard. And they know how hard they had to work and how extra hard they had to do it. And they appreciated all the help that people gave them. But they just don't want to do that. They don't want to invite their friends in and give up a year of solid dancing to help out new dancers get through a 98 call program. They don't want to do it. With this program, once they finish those 50 basics in 12 weeks, they are chomping at the bit to go out and get their friends to come in. That's what we found. And they do. So they buy the second program so they can learn the next 12 calls, but they're there at 6:30 sharp helping us with their new dancers. And if any of you have been dancing more than 30 years, you know that this is exactly the way the successful clubs were run back then. It was satisfied, happy, satisfied dancers bringing their friends in, dancing with them while they learned the calls. And so this is a huge characteristic of the program that makes it work. All right, it's just astounding how this works. As a matter of fact, we decided that this year we would skip our May class to try to consolidate things because we'd gone for 2 years, and we decided, well, we're going to skip the May class, and it is so evident of how much of that is missing. The people who normally would have brought their friends in May didn't get a chance to do that. We had much fewer members of the recently graduated class sign up for the second one. And so there it is. It just, sometimes you put things together and it works. And the plan just works like a charm. It takes some dedication. It takes absolute persistence. And the key element is communication. Communication above everything else is so important. Well, I have like 7 different distribution lists that I use. And one for the Monday Night Plus, and one for people who dance on Monday night who are not members of the club but they dance plus. I have another one for people who have been visitors. I have another one for new class members broken into the different years and different months that they started in. And the mainstream, and then of course the board of directors, because I never send an email out to any club dancer or any other dancer without shadowing or copying my executive board. Always, always, always. Communication is so important. And when people feel like they're being, they're part of the group and they're getting these emails, they respond very positively. And they come in and they help you out. Heck, we had a chili cook-off out of the blue last Thursday night. It was a great success, wasn't it? Yeah. We saw that the Calaveras Twirlers were going to do a chili cook-off dance with Terry Collin. On July 14th? You're calling the dance, Terry. Come on.
It's on my calendar.
And we said, gee, that'd be fun. So why don't we'll do a club chili cook-off so we can get one contestant that'll go over there and enter their chili cook-off. And it was great fun. We had a great fun. So there's a lot that's coming into this that I wish I could express to you without boring you to tears of how wonderful it is to get that feeling again. Because you know what? When I worked for HP, I lost it. I had lost the feeling. Feeling was gone. I was a successful caller. I'd been all around the world calling. And, it wasn't any problem for me to get on the stage and deliver a really good dance. It's just in my blood. But I could see it. I could see it on the faces of the dancers. They would lose patience with each other. The camaraderie wasn't there. The sociability wasn't there. Heck, when I call for jokers, do you know on Wednesday nights we used to go out to the pizza shack from across the street from Frank and Mary Fettig's house? They gave us the key. They cooked up 5 pizzas. They put out 7 pitchers of beer. He locked the place up, gave the key to Frank. The whole club would go over there. And we wouldn't leave there until 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And we had like Jay Klassen and Bill Davis and Honey Wilson and Bob Southern and a lot of the calls all meet over there when they finish their dances. It was great fun. All right, have you seen anything like this going on in today's culture? No. No, you don't. So that's what we want to do with Jackson. That's what we've done. I'm going to turn the floor over to you now for questions. We're recording this because we've had some requests from around the country to put this on a YouTube video. That's why you see the cameras up. And so I'm going to repeat your question, and then we'll try to give you an answer, or we'll let anybody answer. Go ahead.